The propane heater in my garage saved me $300 last winter, which is probably why Brenda Carmichael decided it was her personal mission to destroy my life. I am Nathan Porter, and I have lived in Sunset Ridge Estates in Henderson, Nevada, for exactly 4 years. When I bought my modest 2-bedroom house here, the HOA seemed reasonable enough. The documents were thick, sure, but they promised reasonable governance and community beautification. What they did not promise was a middle-aged tyrant with nothing better to do than peer through my windows with binoculars. It was January 15th when I got the first notice. The envelope was cream-colored, official-looking, with the Sunset Ridge Estates logo stamped in the corner. I opened it while standing at my mailbox, still wearing my work clothes from the warehouse. The letter informed me that propane heaters were strictly forbidden per Section 12, subsection F of the Community Guidelines. I had exactly 72 hours to remove the offending appliance or face daily fines of $100. I walked back to my house, reading the letter 3 times. My propane heater sat in my garage, where I spent most evenings working on furniture restoration projects. The garage was not insulated, and Henderson winters, while not brutal, could drop into the 30s at night. I had checked the HOA documents before buying the heater. Nowhere in my original paperwork did it mention propane restrictions. That evening, I dug through my filing cabinet and pulled out the HOA binder from my closing. I read every single page, nothing about propane heaters, nothing about heating restrictions at all, actually. The only mentions of fire safety related to open flames, fire pits, and barbecues positioned too close to structures. The next morning, I called the HOA office. A cheerful receptionist named Emily answered. "Hi, I am Nathan Porter from 847 Sunset Ridge Drive. I received a violation notice about a propane heater, but I cannot find this rule in my original HOA documents." "Oh, let me transfer you to Mrs. Carmichael. She handles violations." The hold music was interrupted after 30 seconds. "This is Brenda Carmichael, HOA president." Her voice was clipped, professional, with an undertone that suggested she had better things to do. "Yes, hello, Nathan Porter. I got a notice about my propane heater, but this rule is not in my original documents. The board amended the guidelines last March. All residents were sent updated copies. I never received updated copies. That is not our problem, Mr. Porter. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse. The heater needs to be removed by the deadline, or fines will begin accruing. Can I at least see the amended section? I want to understand the reasoning." She sighed, the kind of sigh that said she dealt with idiots all day. "Propane tanks pose explosion risks and are therefore banned from all residential properties within Sunset Ridge Estates. This is for community safety. But my original documents do not prohibit them. You cannot retroactively enforce rules without proper notification." "We sent notifications, Mr. Porter. Check your spam folder." She hung up. I checked my spam folder. Nothing. I checked my email archives going back 2 years. Nothing from the HOA except the monthly newsletter about community events and reminders to keep lawns maintained. That afternoon, I drove to 3 neighbors' houses. Bill Henderson at 851 Sunset Ridge had lived here for 8 years. He invited me in and checked his own email. No amended guidelines. Martha Wellington at 839 had been here 5 years. Same story. Nobody had received these supposed updates. On January 18th, I removed the propane heater from my garage and put it in my storage unit across town. It cost me $45 a month to rent the unit, which irritated me. But I figured I would fight this battle through proper channels. I submitted a formal complaint to the HOA board, requesting copies of the amended guidelines and proof of distribution. I sent it via certified mail, return receipt requested. 2 weeks passed. I received no response to my complaint, but I did receive a new letter. This one informed me that my garage door had been open past 10 p.m. on 3 separate occasions, violating the community aesthetic standards. Each violation carried a $50 fine. My garage door had been open because I was working on refinishing a dresser I had found at an estate sale. The fumes from the stripper required ventilation. I had specifically checked the original HOA documents about this, too. Garage doors could remain open during active use. There was no time restriction mentioned. I called the HOA office again. Emily transferred me again. Mrs. Carmichael, I received another violation notice that contradicts my original HOA documents. Mr. Porter. Her voice had gone from professionally annoyed to openly hostile. I am growing tired of your constant complaints. The board has established rules for the good of the community. If you cannot abide by them, perhaps Sunset Ridge Estates is not the right fit for you. I am happy to follow rules that were properly communicated and legally established. What I am not willing to do is pay fines for violations of rules that I was never notified about and that contradict my original agreement. Your original agreement includes a clause stating that the HOA board reserves the right to amend community standards as needed. You agreed to that when you purchased your property. Amendments still require proper notification to be enforceable. As I told you, notifications were sent. We have documentation of the email distribution. If you did not receive them, that suggests a problem with your email provider, not our notification process. Then send me a copy of the amended guidelines by postal mail. We can do that. There is a $50 processing fee for physical copies of documents. I hung up without responding. This was ridiculous. The next day, I consulted with a real estate attorney named Michael Brennan in Las Vegas. His consultation fee was $200, but I figured it was worth it to understand my legal standing. I brought all my documents, the violation notices, and my email records. Michael spent 40 minutes reviewing everything. "This is pretty straightforward, actually," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The HOA can amend their guidelines, but they have to follow their own bylaws for doing so. According to your original HOA documents, any amendments require a vote at a general meeting with at least 40% of homeowners present or represented by proxy. Additionally, all homeowners must be notified of proposed amendments at least 30 days before the vote. So if they did not do that, the amendments are not valid, correct? And even if they did properly amend the guidelines, they still have to prove they notified you. Email notification is generally acceptable, but if you have documentation showing you never received the emails, and if multiple neighbors can corroborate that they also never received them, that suggests the HOA did not fulfill their notification obligation. What are my options? You can request a hearing with the board to contest the violations. If they rule against you, you can request mediation, which is usually required before taking legal action. If mediation fails, you can sue the HOA for enforcement of improperly enacted rules and for harassment. How much would that cost, realistically? You are looking at $5,000 to $10,000 minimum, possibly more if it drags out, and HOAs usually have deeper pockets than individual homeowners. I left the attorney's office frustrated. I could not afford a lengthy legal battle. I worked as a warehouse supervisor and did furniture restoration as a side business. My savings were decent, but not fight the HOA for years decent. I decided to try the official channels first. I submitted a formal request for a hearing with the board, again via certified mail. 3 weeks later, I received a hearing date, March 5th at 7 p.m. at the community center. In the meantime, winter was getting colder. An unusual cold snap hit Nevada in early February, with temperatures dropping into the 20s at night. My garage was freezing. I tried working in there with just my regular clothing, but my hands got too cold to properly handle tools or apply finish. I looked into getting an electric heater, but my garage had only one outlet, which I needed for my tools. Running an extension cord from the house seemed like a fire hazard, exactly the kind of thing Brenda would write me up for. On February 10th, I received another violation notice. Someone had complained that my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. The fine was $75. My trash cans were in the side yard behind a fence. You could only see them if you walked onto my property and looked through the gate slats. Someone was actively searching for reasons to fine me. I took photographs documenting the trash can placement and the fence. I added them to my growing file of evidence that Brenda Carmichael had a personal vendetta against me. The hearing finally arrived on March 5th. The community center was a small building near the entrance of Sunset Ridge Estates, with a meeting room that could hold maybe 50 people. When I arrived at 6:55, only 5 other people were there. Brenda Carmichael, 3 other board members I vaguely recognized, and Emily, the receptionist, who was setting up a laptop for recording minutes. Brenda sat at the head of a long table, wearing a navy pantsuit and reading glasses on a chain. To her right was a thin man in his 60s who introduced himself as Gerald Stevens, board treasurer. To her left was a heavy-set woman named Patricia Moore, secretary, and a younger man, maybe early 40s, named David Chen, general board member. "Mr. Porter," Brenda said without preamble, "you requested this hearing to contest several violation notices. Please state your case." I remained standing, my folder of documents in hand. "I am contesting these violations on the grounds that the rules I allegedly violated were never properly communicated to me and possibly were never properly enacted according to the HOA bylaws. We sent updated guidelines to all residents via email in March of last year," Brenda said. "We have documentation of the distribution." "I never received any such email. I have checked my records thoroughly." I have also spoken to multiple neighbors who confirm they did not receive these updates either. Perhaps you should choose an email provider with better reliability. "May I see the documentation showing these updates were sent?" Brenda nodded to Emily, who pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a screenshot showing an email with a bulk distribution list, dated March 12th of the previous year. "This shows you sent an email. It does not show that anyone received it. Emails can bounce, get caught in spam filters, or simply fail to deliver." "Do you have red receipts or delivery confirmations?" "We are not required to provide those," Brenda said. "We fulfilled our obligation by sending the notice. Actually, according to the bylaws, you are required to ensure notice is received. That is why the bylaws specify multiple acceptable methods: email, postal mail, or hand delivery. If email fails, you are supposed to follow up with another method." Gerald Stevens leaned forward. "Are you a lawyer, Mr. Porter?" "No, but I consulted with one." "I am simply asking that the HOA follow its own rules." Patricia Moore shuffled some papers. "Mr. Porter, you also violated the trash can visibility ordinance and the garage door hours policy. Those have been in effect since the community was established. I have my original HOA documents here." There is no mention of specific hours for garage door usage, and the trash can policy states they must be stored out of primary view from the street, which mine are. They are behind a fence in my side yard. They are visible through the fence slats, Brenda said. Then every trash can in this neighborhood is in violation because everyone has similar fences. We address violations as they are reported, Brenda replied coolly. So someone is specifically targeting me by peering through my fence to look for violations. Community members are encouraged to report violations to maintain our standards. The hearing continued for another 20 minutes. I presented my photographs, my email records, and statements from 3 neighbors confirming they had also never received the amended guidelines. The board listened with expressions ranging from bored to hostile. At the end, Brenda announced the board would deliberate and notify me of their decision within 10 business days. I received their decision on March 19th. All violations were upheld. Total fines, $425. I had until April 2nd to pay. I was furious. The HOA had clearly not followed proper procedures, but I could not afford to hire an attorney for a lengthy legal battle over a few $100s in fines. It was exactly the calculation Brenda was counting on. I paid the fines. But I started planning. If the HOA wanted to play games with technicalities, I could do the same. My propane heater was banned, fine. But the HOA documents said nothing about electric heaters. Even the supposed amended guidelines that I had finally received a physical copy of after paying the $50 processing fee only mentioned propane, natural gas, and other combustible fuel heaters. Electric heaters were perfectly legal. The problem was that my garage had inadequate electrical service. But that was my problem to solve, not the HOA's. I went to a hardware store and bought 47 small electric space heaters. Each one was a basic 900-watt model, the kind you find on sale for $19 each. I spent about $893 total. Then I went to another store and bought extension cords. Lots of extension cords. I bought 47 heavy-duty outdoor-rated extension cords, each one rated for 15 amps and 30 feet long. My plan was simple. I would run extension cords from every outlet in my house to my garage. I would plug in all 47 space heaters. The combined heat output would keep my garage warm, and there was nothing in the HOA documents that prohibited this. Was it ridiculous? Absolutely. Was it a massive waste of electricity? Definitely. Was it technically compliant with the HOA rules? Yes. On March 23rd, I began implementation. I opened my garage door and started running extension cords from my house. I ran them out my back door, along the side of my house, and into the garage. I ran them out my windows. I ran them out my front door. Orange and yellow extension cords snaked across my yard like bizarre garden decorations. I positioned the space heaters throughout my garage in careful arrangements, making sure none were near flammable materials. I plugged them all in, and the garage began to warm up. The temperature gauge I had mounted on the wall climbed from 42 degrees to 68 degrees in about 30 minutes. The effect was immediate. My electric bill was going to be astronomical, but I was making a point. On March 24th, I received a knock on my door. Brenda Carmichael stood on my porch, her face flushed with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, gesturing at the extension cords running from my house to my garage. "The meaning of what?" I asked innocently. "These extension cords are a blatant violation of community aesthetic standards." "Which section?" "Section 7, regarding maintaining attractive external appearance." Section 7 prohibits permanent alterations to property appearance without approval. Extension cords are temporary and removable, not a violation. This is clearly an attempt to circumvent the propane heater ban. Not at all. I complied with the propane heater ban. I removed my propane heater. These are electric heaters, which are completely legal according to all HOA documents, including the amended guidelines. You cannot have 47 space heaters, which rule prohibits that. She opened and closed her mouth several times. This is a safety hazard. I am happy to have the fire marshal inspect my setup. Every extension cord is properly rated. Every heater is positioned safely. I am not exceeding the amperage limits on any circuit. This is completely safe and completely legal. We will see about that. She turned and marched back to her car, which was idling in my driveway. I closed the door and allowed myself a small smile. The next day, 2 guys from the Henderson Fire Department showed up to inspect my electrical setup. They spent about 45 minutes examining everything, testing the cords, checking the circuit breakers, and measuring the heat output. The older inspector, whose name tag read Morrison, finally turned to me. "This is the weirdest thing I have seen in a while, but it is technically safe. You are not overloading any circuits. The cords are properly rated. The heaters are positioned correctly. I would not recommend this as a long-term solution because of the energy waste, but it is not a fire hazard." "Thank you, sir." He shook his head, grinning slightly. "HOA dispute." "How did you guess? We get called out for these things more than you would think. People do crazy stuff to get around HOA rules. After they left, I felt vindicated. The fire department had signed off on my setup. Brenda had no legitimate grounds to make me remove it, but she was not done. On March 27th, I received another violation notice. This one claimed that the extension cords violated the prohibition on excessive external wiring. The fine was $250. I looked through every single page of every HOA document I had. There was no mention of excessive external wiring. This was a completely made-up rule. I called the HOA office. "Emily, hi, it is Nathan Porter. I need to speak with Mrs. Carmichael." "She is not available right now, Mr. Porter." "When will she be available?" "I am not sure. She is very busy." "Please tell her I called regarding another invalid violation notice. I will be filing another formal complaint and requesting another hearing." I submitted my complaint that same day, again via certified mail. That weekend, something strange happened. I came home from running errands on Saturday afternoon to find my extension cords had been cut. Not all of them, just about 15 of them, severed cleanly about halfway along their length. I stood in my driveway, staring at the damage. This was vandalism. This was destruction of property. Someone had come onto my land and deliberately damaged my belongings. I called the Henderson Police Department. An officer named Rodriguez arrived about 40 minutes later. He took photographs of the cut cords and wrote up a report. "You have any idea who might have done this?" he asked. "I am in a dispute with my HOA president. This setup is legal, but she wants it gone. I cannot prove she did this, but the timing is suspicious." "Do you have security cameras?" "No, but I am going to install some." He handed me a case number. "File a report with your insurance if the damage is significant enough. And yeah, get cameras. If this is part of an ongoing dispute, it probably will not be the last incident." That afternoon, I went to an electronics store and bought 4 security cameras with motion detection and cloud recording. I installed them at each corner of my house, covering all angles of my property. I also went back to the hardware store and bought 15 more extension cords to replace the damaged ones. By Sunday evening, my setup was fully operational again, and my cameras were recording. On Monday, March 31st, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Porter, this is David Chen from the HOA board." David was the youngest board member, the one who had barely spoken during my hearing. "Yes, hello. Listen, I wanted to call you off the record. What Brenda is doing is not right. Some of us on the board are not happy with how she is handling this situation. Okay. She is pushing through these violation notices without full board approval. Gerald and Patricia just go along with whatever she says because they have been friends for 20 years. I have only been on the board for 6 months, and I am starting to see how she operates. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you should know that not everyone supports what she is doing, and because I think you should also know that she is planning to escalate things. She mentioned at a board meeting that she is going to push for a lien on your property if you do not remove the extension cords. A lien. That was serious. That could affect my ability to sell my house or refinance my mortgage, based on a made-up rule about excessive external wiring. Yeah. Look, I cannot vote against her without evidence that she is acting improperly. But if you can document her violations of proper procedures, I will support you. I appreciate the heads up. Just be careful. Brenda has done this before. She forced out a family 2 years ago over a dispute about a kid's playset. She made their lives so miserable they sold their house and moved. After hanging up, I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. Brenda was a bully who abused her power to torment people who did not comply with her personal preferences, but I was not going to be bullied. On April 2nd, I received a notice of intent to file a lien. The HOA claimed I owed an additional $1,000 in fines for ongoing violations related to the extension cords. If I did not pay within 30 days and remove the cords, they would file a lien on my property. I immediately scheduled a consultation with Michael Brennan, my attorney. This time, I was willing to spend the money for a proper legal fight. Michael reviewed all my documentation, the violation notices, the hearing minutes, my photographs, the police report about the vandalized cords, and my security camera footage from the past week. "This is actually a strong case," he said. "The HOA is clearly overstepping. They are inventing rules, not following proper procedures, and now threatening a lien based on illegitimate violations. We can fight this. How much will it cost?" "I can handle this for a flat fee of $3,000, which includes filing a lawsuit, handling discovery, and representing you through trial if necessary. Most likely, the HOA will settle once they realize they are in the wrong." $3,000. It was a lot of money. But it was worth it to stop Brenda from destroying my life. Let's do it. Michael filed a lawsuit in Clark County District Court on April 9th. The lawsuit alleged harassment, improper enforcement of HOA rules, violations of the HOA's own bylaws, and sought damages for the vandalized extension cords plus attorney fees. The HOA was served with the lawsuit on April 11th. On April 12th, Brenda called me directly. Her voice was tight with fury. "You are suing the HOA. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost the community?" "I am suing because the HOA, specifically you, have been harassing me with illegitimate violation notices and threatening to place a lien on my property based on made-up rules. If you had followed proper procedures from the beginning, none of this would be necessary. You are being ridiculous. All we asked was for you to remove a dangerous propane heater, which I did. And then you continued finding new reasons to fine me. And then someone vandalized my property right after you inspected my extension cord setup." There was a pause. "Are you accusing me of vandalism?" "I am saying it is suspicious timing. I have security cameras now, by the way, so if anything else happens to my property, I will have evidence." She hung up without another word. Over the next 2 weeks, something interesting happened. I started receiving visits from neighbors. Bill Henderson came by on April 14th. "Hey, Nathan, I heard about your lawsuit. Good for you. Brenda has been a nightmare for years." Martha Wellington stopped by on April 16th with a casserole and a story about how Brenda had fined her $300 for planting roses in the wrong shade of pink. A younger couple from 3 streets over, Tom and Sarah Dennison, came by on April 18th and told me about how Brenda had tried to ban their daughter's wheelchair ramp, claiming it violated aesthetic standards. By the end of April, I had spoken with 16 different homeowners who had stories of Brenda's abusive enforcement tactics. Many of them offered to provide statements for my lawsuit. Michael was thrilled. "This establishes a pattern of behavior. This is great." The HOA's attorney, a corporate lawyer named Richard Walsh, reached out to Michael on April 23rd to discuss settlement. Michael told me they were offering to drop all fines against me if I dropped the lawsuit. "Absolutely not," I said. "I want attorney fees, compensation for my damaged property, and I want the improperly enacted rule amendments invalidated." Michael relayed my terms. Walsh said he would discuss it with the board. On April 29th, my security cameras caught something interesting. At 2:30 a.m., a figure approached my house and began cutting extension cords again. The motion-activated lights came on, and I got a clear view of the person's face. It was Brenda Carmichael. I downloaded the footage immediately and sent it to both Michael and the police. Officer Rodriguez came by the next morning. He watched the footage and shook his head. "That is pretty clear. We can charge her with criminal mischief and trespassing. Do it." Brenda was arrested on May 1st. The local news picked up the story because HOA president arrested for vandalizing homeowner's property made for a good headline. By May 2nd, the story had spread across local social media and several state news outlets. The publicity was terrible for the HOA. Property values started to become a concern, and other board members began distancing themselves from Brenda. On May 4th, the entire HOA board except Brenda resigned. An emergency election was held on May 7th, and 3 new board members were elected. David Chen retained his seat, and 2 new members, including Martha Wellington, joined the board. The new board's first action was to fire Richard Walsh and hire a new attorney. Their second action was to settle my lawsuit. On May 15th, I signed a settlement agreement. The HOA paid me $5,000, which covered my attorney fees, the cost of my damaged extension cords, the cost of my security cameras, and some additional compensation for the harassment. All fines against me were voided. The improperly enacted rule amendments were formally rescinded, pending proper review and reenactment according to correct procedures. Brenda Carmichael was prosecuted for criminal mischief and trespassing. She pleaded guilty on June 3rd and was sentenced to 100 hours of community service, probation for 1 year, and ordered to pay restitution for the damaged property. She also resigned from the HOA board in disgrace. On June 10th, the new HOA board held a community meeting to discuss proper procedures for rule amendments going forward. Over 100 homeowners attended, the largest turnout in Sunset Ridge Estates history. David Chen, now serving as interim president, stood at the front of the room. "We are committed to transparent, fair governance. We will follow our bylaws. We will ensure proper notification of any proposed changes, and we will listen to homeowner concerns." There was applause. I sat in the back, satisfied. My 47 space heaters and miles of extension cords had been vindicated. Actually, I kept the setup running through the end of May, just to make a point. My electric bill for April was $970, which was insane, but worth it. In early June, once the settlement was finalized and the weather warmed up, I finally disconnected everything and coiled up the extension cords in my garage. I bought a new propane heater in August, ready for the next winter. The newly enacted HOA guidelines, properly voted on and distributed with clear documentation, did include some heating restrictions, but they were reasonable. Propane tanks over 20 pounds required secondary containment, and heaters had to be positioned at least 3 feet from walls. I could live with that. Life in Sunset Ridge Estates improved dramatically after Brenda's departure. The new board focused on actual community improvements rather than nitpicking enforcement. They organized neighborhood events, fixed the community pool that had been neglected for years, and generally made the neighborhood a nicer place to live. Martha Wellington stopped by one evening in late August while I was working in my garage on a vintage dresser. "How is the furniture business?" she asked. "Good. I just sold a dining table set for $1,200. "That is wonderful." She paused. "You know, what you did took a lot of courage, standing up to Brenda. Most people just gave in because it was easier." "It was not easy, but it was necessary. People like her only have power because good people do not push back." "Well, you pushed back, and the whole community is better for it." She was right. Sometimes the right thing to do is not the easiest thing. Sometimes you have to make a ridiculous stand with 47 space heaters and a mountain of extension cords to prove a point. Sometimes you have to be willing to fight, even when it costs money and time and stress, because principles matter. In September, I was elected to the HOA board myself. I had not planned to run, but several neighbors encouraged me, and I figured I could help ensure the community stayed on the right track. My first board meeting was on September 12th. We discussed routine matters, landscaping contracts, pool maintenance schedules, and a proposal to add more community lighting along the walking paths. It was boring. It was mundane. It was exactly what an HOA board should be. At the end of the meeting, David Chen turned to me. "By the way, Nathan, we have been getting questions about the regulations for outdoor lighting. Can you review the current guidelines and make recommendations?" "Sure. I will have something for the next meeting." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the past 6 months. It had been stressful and frustrating and occasionally infuriating, but it had also been weirdly satisfying. I had stood up to a bully. I had helped reform a broken system. I had made my community better, and I had learned that sometimes the most ridiculous solutions are the most effective ones. My garage was warm and comfortable now as fall approached. I worked on my furniture projects with my legally compliant propane heater humming quietly in the corner. The extension cords were coiled up on a shelf, a reminder of the absurd battle I had fought and won. Occasionally, I would drive past Brenda Carmichael's house on the other side of the neighborhood. She still lived there, but she kept to herself. I heard from other neighbors that she had become something of a recluse after her arrest and conviction. Part of me felt a little bad about how things had ended for her, but mostly, I just felt relieved that she was no longer in a position to torment people. In October, I organized a community garage sale, which was a huge success. Over 30 families participated, and we raised enough money to fund new playground equipment for the neighborhood park. I worked with Martha and David to ensure everything was properly organized and permitted. The newspaper that had covered Brenda's arrest did a follow-up story about the community's transformation. The reporter interviewed me, David, and several other residents. The article talked about how one homeowner's stand against HOA overreach had sparked positive change throughout Sunset Ridge Estates. I kept a copy of that article in my garage, next to my coiled extension cords. Winter came again. My propane heater worked perfectly, keeping my garage at a comfortable temperature while I worked on furniture. My electric bill stayed reasonable. The HOA did not send me any violation notices. It was exactly how things should have been from the beginning. On a cold evening in December, I was applying finish to a coffee table when I heard a knock on my garage door. I opened it to find a young couple I did not recognize. "Hi, are you Nathan Porter?" the man asked. "Yes, I am James Kirkland, and this is my wife, Rachel. We are considering buying a house in Sunset Ridge Estates, and our realtor mentioned you might be a good person to talk to about the HOA." I invited them into my garage, where it was warm. I told them the whole story: the propane heater ban, the 47 space heaters, the lawsuit, Brenda's arrest, and the reforms that followed. They listened with wide eyes. "So the HOA is better now?" Rachel asked. "Much better. We follow proper procedures, we communicate clearly. We focus on actual community improvement instead of petty enforcement. But I would recommend reading all the documents carefully before buying, and do not hesitate to ask questions if something does not make sense." "That is really helpful," James said. "Thank you." After they left, I thought about how far things had come. Sunset Ridge Estates was not perfect, but it was a functioning community now, one where homeowners felt heard and respected rather than bullied and harassed. All because I had refused to back down. All because I had been willing to do something ridiculous to prove a point. On New Year's Eve, the HOA hosted a community party at the community center. It was the first social event the board had organized in years that was not just a mandatory meeting. Over 200 residents showed up. I talked with neighbors I had never met before. I ate too much food from the potluck tables. I watched kids run around playing games while their parents socialized. David Chen found me near the end of the evening. "This is what a community should feel like." "Yeah, it is." "You know, when I joined the board, I thought I was just going to rubber stamp Brenda's decisions. I did not realize how toxic things had become. Thank you for forcing the issue." "I just wanted to heat my garage without going broke," he laughed. "Well, you did a lot more than that." As midnight approached, everyone gathered outside to watch fireworks that a few residents had pooled money to buy. I stood with my neighbors, watching colorful explosions light up the Nevada sky. It had been a strange year, a frustrating year, but ultimately a good year. I still had my 47 space heaters stored in my garage as a reminder. Every now and then, someone would ask to see them, and I would tell the story again. It had become something of a legend in Sunset Ridge Estates. The time a homeowner fought back against HOA tyranny with an absurd electrical setup, and actually won. In February of the new year, I finally sold the space heaters in a bulk lot on an online marketplace. A guy who ran a disaster relief organization bought all 47 for $300. He said they would be useful for emergency shelters. The extension cords I kept. You never know when you might need them. The furniture restoration business continued to grow. I was getting commissions from people across Henderson and even Las Vegas. My garage stayed warm and comfortable, my propane heater working efficiently, legally, and without harassment. Life was good. One afternoon in March, exactly 1 year after the whole mess began, I received a letter from the HOA. My heart sank for a moment, old instincts kicking in. But when I opened it, it was not a violation notice. It was a thank you note, signed by all the current board members and over 50 homeowners. "Thank you for standing up for our community. Thank you for demanding accountability. Thank you for making Sunset Ridge Estates a better place to live. I put that letter on my refrigerator, where I saw it every day. Sometimes the right thing to do looks ridiculous. Sometimes you have to make a point in the most absurd way possible. Sometimes you have to be willing to run 47 space heaters on extension cords just to prove that rules need to be fair and properly enacted. And sometimes, just sometimes, ridiculous resistance changes everything. I never regretted buying those space heaters. They cost me money and caused me stress, and probably took years off my life from the frustration. But they also gave me something valuable. Proof that standing up to bullies works, proof that individuals can make a difference, and proof that communities can change for the better when good people refuse to be silent. Nathan Porter, homeowner, furniture restoration specialist, and former operator of the most ridiculous heating system in Henderson, Nevada. That was my legacy in Sunset Ridge Estates, and I was proud of it.